We've known scientifically now, this is settled science, they like to use that word, that the universe had an absolute beginning from nothing. You know, I got a comment from a guy who thought he was science-minded, and he said that I was saying the wrong thing because I was making science say that the universe came from nothing. No, that's what science says. Think about the book, Lawrence Krauss, How the Universe Came from Nothing. Think about Stephen Hawking, The Universe Came from Nothing, The Grand Design. Scientists are exactly saying that. Now they're trying, because they know that's not logically true, you can't get something from nothing, they want to redefine nothing into something. Hey, welcome to Church for Skeptics. Dan Arsenal here. In the last episode, we talked about something called gaslighting based on the movie in 1944. Gaslighting means manipulation. If you're being manipulated to believe something that you shouldn't believe reasonably, then you're being gaslighted. That's happened, in a lot of places, of course. Last week we talked about the idea of, atheists will say you don't have free will. You don't make choices because you're a naturalist, and they're naturalists and materialists. And logically, if atheism is true, that has to be the case. Here's something really important before we get to the next session about this. I hope you'll follow my logic here. It seems to me that when Richard Dawkins says there is no evidence for the existence of God, which of course what he would say in the God delusion, it's a delusion. Just like free will is a delusion, an illusion, because he believes that we don't have free will because everything's determined by natural processes, chemistry, basically, DNA. Now, here's I really want you to get this. If you start your argument or your thinking with the idea that atheism is true, then you have to come to the logical conclusion that we don't have free will. If atheism is true, then nothing exists except matter, and if nothing exists except matter, then we don't have free will. Everything's determined by natural processes that are totally out of our control. Of course, we don't have any sovereignty, let's say. Here's my logic. What if we start in a neutral position and we experience, by what we call common sense, we experience free will? And I'm going to say you do. Every day you experience free will. You're watching this, if you don't shut me down, to follow this argument. So if you are doing something, anything that you have chosen to do that you could have done otherwise, you are exercising free will. If free will then is let's call it scientific, if it's a scientific reality that we have free will, then we can say that we do indeed have a mind, we do indeed are persons, and that means that materialism is not true. You see my logic here? They're starting with the assumption that proves that materialism is true. I'm starting with reality. The reality of free will, the reality of so many things that are our human experience, consciousness, reason, the ability to reason. And so once we experience that, we realize that it can't possibly be that there's nothing existing except matter. Certainly matter exists. So we would call it dualism, that there is a physical reality and a spiritual reality. Hence, then, of course, the need for the existence of God. I hope that makes sense to you. So that was the first one, and now I'm going to show you the magazine I didn't get that from that, but this is Salvo magazine. I think it's the best of its kind. And it talks about, I'll just read the cover here, it talks about sex, science, and society. And so it's about culture, it's about science. There are a lot of scientific arguments in here. I just recommend it, and I'm getting some of the information. And you can see here on the front part, it talks about the Scopes monkey trial. So it's a 100-year anniversary, and so they've emphasized that, and so am I. Second way you're being gaslighted, other than the illusion that you have free will, is the appearance of design. Now think about this. Oh my goodness, it just, as my mother would say, scalds my apple butter. Richard Dawkins said there's no evidence for the existence of God in his book. And then he says it's the business of science to take a lot of things that appear to be designed and show that they're not really designed, they just happen by chance. And of course the idea behind that is the reason we think they're designed is because over time they have survived and gotten more complex, and so they look like they're really designed that way, but they just happen to be the one that survived. Or the part that survived, or the species that survived, and so they look like they're designed that way. Again, it's almost the same thing. If you start with the premise that evolution is true, that Darwin is right, if you start with that, then you have to investigate the evidence that you have that things really look like they're designed. Look at the heart, look at the lungs, look at the earth and the size of the earth. Look at so many things that look like they're designed for a purpose. I mean, it's almost ad infinitum. It's just on and on and on. Everything virtually looks like it's designed for a purpose. And we intuitively know that, not because we're just building our life on emotion or intuition, but because it's true. But because it's so obvious that you have to explain it away, that things look designed, because they are designed. And if they're designed, they have a designer. That's the point about this. Now we could go on and on and on and on about intelligent design. Intelligent design, that's kind of the bottom line for what I'm trying to make the case for here, is that it's so obvious. That we've talked about so many things, the size of the sun, the size of the moon being tilted, that makes the earth tilt at 23-degree angles. It's exactly the right size. So when we look at the sun and the moon, they look exactly the same size, because one is 400 times bigger, but it's also 400 times farther away. And so you have this perfect view, which causes eclipses. And that's how we really study the sun anyway, during a total eclipse. It just goes on and on and on. We're living our lives as we were created to live our lives, making decisions, being persons, having reason, making choices, and having a conscience that tells us when we're doing right or wrong. We often violate our conscience, of course. And that's why we need forgiveness. And that's the bottom line for all of this, is I want you to consider Jesus Christ as the forgiver of all sins, by all costs, of course, that he made. But my point is, all this really, truth goes together. Truth has to hang together. You can't, that's what makes it true. It's real. Reality in every situation, every case is reality. It's the whole correspondence theory of truth, but it's reality. What is real is also true, and it has to hang together. You can't have things that contradict each other if they are both true. That's the law of non-contradiction, the most basic law of logic. And so once you start, you're sort of like on a roll. If free will is real, then God is real. It connects. The appearance of design means that things are really designed, then you have to have a designer. The logic continues. And if you have a designer, you have that in your heart as well. I feel a little frustrated that people are being gaslighted about this. And so let me give you a couple other things here. Determinism, which is the whole free will idea, leads to something else. If we are here for no reason and no purpose, we happened accidentally, and you can't even really say accidentally, because that presumes there was a design that went bad. So we're just here for no reason at all. That's called nihilism. Nihilism is a philosophy it's called nothingness. And I think it's one of the most dangerous, most hurtful philosophies that people can live with, and they do. You go two ways with nihilism. You could say anything goes. We're just gonna, we're only gonna be here for a while, and that's it. And it doesn't matter. There's no judgment. There's no reason for right or wrong. That was Friedrich Nietzsche. He was a nihilist, of course, and there are several philosophers that were nihilists. Or the other reason is that I'm lost. I have no reason to be here, and so I might as well kill myself. And of course, that's also happens continually here. Thankfully, the appearance of design is so profound that it just cannot go away. You think about this, kind of basing on this on the 100th anniversary of the Scopes monkey trial. And again, Richard Dawkins saying that the greatest contribution of Charles Darwin is to make atheism intellectual satisfying. If in the last 100 years, science itself has deflated Darwinism to the point that it is on its last ropes, then along with being intellectually satisfying, atheism itself is on the ropes. I hope that's true. I mean, you think, well, maybe we're just going back to a time when most everybody believed in God. Well, most everybody still does. And it's not because of anything except the intuition that they are living their lives made in the image of God, and that the universe itself appears to be so well designed that we cannot be pure by chance. I'll finish with this. There are so many evidences that we cannot be here by chance. Let me just make a cumulative case here. And I realize I'm going to say some things that I've been saying for a while, but here's my problem is when they pile up, the evidence becomes so strong, and that's the whole cumulative case idea, is that you just have one brick after another brick after another brick. So if you just take one thing, you lose the effect of the cumulative case. And so you kind of have to review it. But my point is this: within the last 100 years, since the Scopes monkey trial, where Darwinism made atheism intellectually satisfying, we've known scientifically now, this is settled science, they like to use that word, that the universe had an absolute beginning from nothing. You know, I got a comment from a guy who thought he was science-minded, and he said that I was saying the wrong thing because I was making science say that the universe came from nothing. No, that's what science says. Think about the book, Lawrence Krauss, How the Universe Came from Nothing. Think about Stephen Hawking, The Universe Came from Nothing, The Grand Design. Scientists are exactly saying that now. They're trying, because they know that's not logically true, you can't get something from nothing. They want to redefine nothing into something. And that's why, I mean, even atheists, even atheistic philosophers took Stephen Hawking to task with his book, The Grand Design, because it was so philosophically flawed and scientifically flawed, and it used tons of arguments that were not scientifically confirmed, like the multiverse, and they took those as scientific facts when in fact they were not scientific facts. It just didn't work. Lawrence Krauss, the same idea here: something or nothing becomes something. But the point is, you have scientist after scientist after saying, no, the universe came from nothing. Well, what's the best explanation for that besides creation? And that's exactly, God spoke the universe into existence, because that's what He does. He is God. That's what creation means. I just think the common sense evidence for God is overwhelming. And you can be gaslighted by saying, yeah, everything appears to be everything. This is exactly what Dawkins says. Everything appears to be designed, but it's not really. You're being gaslighted with that. Yes, it does. It really looks designed because it's designed. It's obvious that. And arguments have been made to that effect. Think about the old watchmaker argument from William Paley back in the 1700s. And he didn't have all the scientific evidence and all the bricks that we have now, but we have all these bricks now. We're making the cumulative case for the existence of God through science itself. The universe had a beginning. That's Genesis 1. And now we know that the universe also has to be so finely tuned to exist gravity and the expansion rate have to be so finely desicced that we don't expand too fast, we burn up, or we don't collapse into a black hole. Everything has to be just perfectly balanced, and those are only two of those parameters. The next scientific settled science is this. We know, they call it fine-tuning, they call it anthropic principle, they call it the Goldilocks effect, that it is so amazing that everything that has to be just right, just so, for us to have life on planet Earth, right size Earth, the right tilt, and so forth, the right moon, the right ingredients, the right chemicals, everything has to be just right. If anything were off just a little bit, you can't get that many things together by chance, that perfect without chance. The odds against it are so great, you certainly would never want to go to Las Vegas with those kind of odds, and I'm going to say you don't want to die with them either. It just makes sense. It makes so much sense that we're here for a purpose. Everything in me has a purpose. Sometimes when those things in me, because I'm getting older, start having problems, let's say, if you get arthritis, then my joints don't work like they're supposed to. They're intended to do. It just goes on and on and on and on. I know this has kind of been a scrambled episode, but I hope you can sense my need to just tell you what I think and encourage you to think about it as well. Thanks for watching.